Okay.
He was looking for tzedakah. He was looking for.
Yeah, he was looking for tzedakah. I told him, it was a middle. I'm like, wait. But, okay, first one. Okay, so let's see what we have over here. So we started off with the sugya of Teisha Chanuyos. The halacha is that whenever you paskin on the suffix, we normally go basarayv. However, when the only time you go basarayv is only if the suffix that we have has left its place. But if we have a suffix that the suffix is nailed in its place, then you always say it's 50-50. In the case of Teisha Chanuyos, which illustrates it, is if you have 10 stores that are in a plaza, one of the stores sells non-kosher meat, and 9 of the stores sell kosher meat, and you mindlessly wandered into one of the stores and purchased some meat, and you went home with the meat, and you realized that you don't know which store you bought it from. So there you don't go basarayv, because the suffix was noiled when you were inside the store. You don't go basarayv there. The Gemara compared that to a case where there were 10 piles of bread, 9 of them were matzah, and 1 of them was chametz. And a mouse came, and you saw the mouse take from one of the piles and go into the house. And we don't know whether it's chametz or matzah. Again, there the suffix was noiled at the pile when the mouse took it, and therefore you don't go basarayv. You say it's 50-50. However, if you see a mouse that has some bread in its mouth, and you didn't see where it got the bread from, and you assume it picked the bread off the floor somewhere, so there the suffix was noilad on the piece when the piece was already separated from the pile. That's like finding a piece of meat in the plaza on the floor. It's a meat that's left the store. There you could go basarayv. So technically, if a person goes into one of the stores and buys meat, he can't use it. So what does he do? He'll throw it on the floor in the parking lot. The next guy can come along and take it and be soymech on the roif, because to the next guy who picked it up from the floor, it was parish from the roif. So don't throw it out. Drop it on the floor. At least somebody else can benefit from it. So those are the first 2 cases we discussed. Then we had a third case that was discussed, where you had 2 piles, echad shel matzah, ve'echad shel chametz. You had 2 piles of bread. One was matzah bread and one was chametz bread. Ulefneim shnei batim. And in front of these 2 piles were 2 homes. Echad badim, ve'echad she'enei badim. Ve'azu shnei achborim, 2 mice came along. Echad shakal matzah, ve'echad shakal chametz. Ve'lo yadinan hai lahai ayel, v'hai lahai ayel. We don't know which mouse went into the house that was baduk, and which mouse went into the house that wasn't baduk. Or more important, which piece of lechem went into the baduk? Was it matzah or chametz? And which lechem went into the eina baduk? Was it matzah or chametz? And the question is, do you have to be baduk both places again? And that the Gemara says that's the case of shnei kupos. It's not shnei kupos. Achas shel chulin v'achas shel truma. You had 2 boxes, one had chulin inside it and one had truma inside it. V'lefnem shnei side. And then there were 2 piles of grain right in front of these 2 boxes. Achad shel chulin v'achad shel truma. V'noflu elu l'toich and the piles fell into the boxes. So the halach is mutarid. What do you know? You say they're both mutter. So to here, you'll say that the matzah was the piece of bread that went into the house that was baduk, and the chametz went into the house that was einei baduk. And the reason for it is, yesterday I didn't prepare ahead enough, but the reason for it is because it's a suffix d'Rabbanan. The whole chiyuv to make medika is only midrabanan, and it's a suffix d'Rabbanan. And the Gemara challenges that, says that right away. Eimar damrinon shani omer. Where do you say this shani omer? Where do you say that your luck is perfect and it ends up that the chulin fell into the chulin and the truma fell into the truma. That I say that with truma derabona. Maybe I only say that kula by truma, which is derabona, like Rashi says, like nowadays, where it's only with derabona, and therefore it's only a sovek derabona, and therefore you could be soimach lekula. But bechametz da'iraisa mi'aminan, will you say this halacha by chametz, which is an issur da'iraisa? Zok to Gemara. Also, b'dikas chametz da'iraisa, there might be an issur to have chametz midaraisa, but the chiv to make bedika is not midaraisa. We said it's midrabanan because you might really bittul to be enough, and midrabanan they're mechayiv you to make a bedika just in case you'll find something that might be luring, that might be attractive to you on Pesach. Drabanan, it's midrabanan. The midaraisa bebittul ba'alma sagila. So therefore, since it's a sovek derabanan, you go lakula, and we'll say that the chametz went into the house that was ein bodak, so you have to be bodak anyway, and the matzah was taken into the house that was bodak, and you don't have to be bodak again. Zok to Gemara. How about the following? Tzibur or tzover echad shel chametz. You only had one pile, and you had one pile of chametz. Ulefon of base bottom, and there are two homes in front of you, bedukin, and both these houses are bodak. The Osa Achbar, a mouse came along, the shakal, and took a piece of chametz and went into one of the houses. The lo yadiman, and you don't know ilahai al, and you don't know which. If it for sure went into one of the two houses, you just don't know which of the two houses they went into. Zok to Gemara, the way we approach this shaila is with the comparison to another famous case of Hainu Shnei Shavilim. This is the case of Shnei Shavilim, which is a very famous sugi in Shas. It's non we learned. Shnei Shavilim, if you have two paths, Echa Tomei, one was Tomei, and Rashi says Tomei means it's impossible to go down that path without becoming Tomei. Why? Because there's a mace buried in that path across its width, so it's impossible to go around. The mace is from end to end, from side to side of the street. So if you walk down the street, there's no way to get to the other end of the street without coming into contact with tumah. The chatar, and the other street does not have any tumah in it. The halach be'echad mehen, and you walk down one of these two paths, and v'osa tahiris, and then you touched tahiris. Uvachaver, and your friend came along, v'halach b'sheni, and he walked down a different path, v'osa tahiris, and he touched not the same tahiris, he touched a different set of tahiris. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Im nishalu zeh b'fnei atzmai v'zeh b'fnei atzmai. If Reuben says, I went into one of these two paths, and then I touched the tahiris, what is the status of the tahiris? The Rabbanan will tell him tahirin. The Rabbanan will tell him that it's tar. Shnein b'vasachas, if they both came. Now the question is, why would they say tar? That's a suffix da'iraisa. It's a suffix tumah. Tumah is da'iraisa. So Rashi tells us that there's a special rule that we learn out of Soita. We learn a dual rule from Soita. Suffix tameh b'rishus hayachid sveikai tameh. Whenever you have a suffix tumah and it's in rishus hayachid, we paskin that suffix it's tameh. But suffix tumah b'rishus harabim, if you have a suffix tumah and it's in a public place, such as a street, we paskin that it's tahar. So therefore, initial zebef ne'atzmai, if they each ask their own shaila independently, the Rabbanan will paskin them taharin, because they each have the kula of sofik tamei, rishus harabim, svekei tar. But shneim b'fasachas, but if they both ask the rabbi together, then tamein, because svekei tamei means misafik tummy, but it's impossible that they're both tar. So it must be that one of them is going to be tummy. Therefore, if they ask together, they can't be a tar to the sasri. Rabbi Yosy says, "Benkach ubenkach tmein." Regardless of how you ask, it's going to be tummy. We have to explain this machlokes. If they both came together and they asked the shaila simultaneously, divrei hakoil tumein. Everybody would agree, both Rabbi Yosy as well as Rabbi Yehuda would hold that they're tummy. It's attacked in the sasra. it's impossible that they could both be tar. They both agree that at first Reuven went to ask the Shaila, and then afterward Shimon went to ask the Shaila, Divra Koil tar. In each case, the Rav could paskin that Sofik Tomei Rishus Arabim Svekei Torah. Loy Nachlu. Where is Rabbi Yosy and Rabbi Huda arguing? If one person came along and asked the Shaila on his behalf and on behalf of his friend, Rabbi Yosy holds that like Basachas, if one person is asking for both, it's the same type of the Sasvi. Rabbi Yehuda considers it like a Zachar. Why is it that? So Rashi explains it as follows. Then it's tar. Bezin can't declare either person as a tame. Since this occurred in the Rishus Harabim, it's tar. However, if they come together, since in one psak we have to say they're either both tame or they're both tar, we can't tell them both simultaneously that they're both tar. But Pesach is that divrei kol tarin, because Alpha Pisha called Echad Omer Lefanenu Kach Haya Hamaisa Shali Shel Chavei. Aval Ein Nishal Elalatzmi Mateelai. Even though we're both there and we're both asking, but I'm only asking for myself, and he's only asking for himself. So even though we're both there together, but if it's not b'vasachas, then they can pass each shaila individually on its own merits. What about Olav al Chavei, which is where the Gemara explains is where Rabbi Yosy and Rabbi Huda are arguing. And what was the question? So one person, Reuven came and said, Matahei al Shnenu. What is the halacha with me and my friend? Rabbi Yosy medabelu lebasachas. Rabbi Yosy considers it lebasachas. The apapish ain't shneim lefanecha. Even though they're not both here, only one of them is here. Tzorich ata hayra achas l'shneim. You have to again offer one psak for both of them. Oy tmei matem, oy tahir matem. And you cannot say both tahir matem. That's how Rabbi Yosy lives. But Rabbi Yehuda medabelu l'zachazeh. Why? This is interesting. Since there's still only one person asking the shaila, we don't answer him on both shailas simultaneously. Rather, mashivin loy tar ata, sharei safek biyahu, and you don't have to say anything about the friend. Umay atzma yovin, he, by the fact that we answered what's his status, he'll on his own figure out sha'af chavera kamoyu. But the bezin doesn't have to explicitly paskin on both people together. They only have to address him without issuing a psak for his friend, and he on his own can figure out what the psak for the friend is. That avoids the target discussion.
Yosy, what is this for behind saying that Tamid B'Shir Rabin is tar, or
there's no svara for it. It's exeris hakosov.
It's exeris hakosov?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's a svara behind it. Because it doesn't, where the subject occurs, whether it occurs with Shishayach or Shishayrabin, is not a reason to paskin Tomei or Tar. It's just we don't have cited.
Okay. Where do you know where? I mean, where do you see it? How do you see it?
Because by Saita, we're Matama Hermi Suffolk, and that was done, the Saita action was done in a private place. It was done in a Rosh Hashanah. So therefore we say whenever there's a Sabbat Tum in Rosh Hashanah, we consider it Tummy.
Because the reality is that one of them are tummy.
Correct.
That's the reality.
The
One of them has to be
us,
tummy. We just don't know.
That's right. We don't know which one. So but the Torah is telling us that you could paskin in such a case misafik that it's tar.
Okay.
So let's see what the Gemara says. The Gabe bottom nami. So how does this translate into our case where we don't know which house the mouse ran into? In both if each person on his own asks the Rav, must they make a new bedika? Amrinile l'chol chad will answer to each one of these two homeowners. Ata tzarich livlek. You don't have to make another bedika. The kiva the bedika chametz derabanan. The balt bedika chametz derabanan. Talinin lakula will be titled lakula. Amrin sveke mutter. So in essence, what Rashi is saying is the reason why by chametz's mutter is not really the same reason as shnei shvilin. By shnei shvilin, each person is mutter because of the gzer sakasuv of Sofik Tuma, Rishus Harabim, Sfekei Tar. By B'dikas Chometz Derabanan, the reason why we'll pass the Lakula for each one is because it's Sofik Derabanan Lakula. Rabin Sfekei Mutter. Vive Vasachas Bo, then Shneim, Tzrichen, B'dika.
Yosy, just I don't want to harp on this, but the Tuma by Saita is a whole different Tuma than the Tuma by these, right? Tuma, as a matter of fact, in this week's Parsha, it's the first time the word Tuma is used, and it's defiled, a sexual defilement. That's the context. But the Tuma by, if something is a Tuma piece of meat, that's a whole different type of Tuma. I don't see how you can learn one from the other.
I hear, but the Gemara does.
Right, because she doesn't have a tuma. If somebody touches this,
it's not like she's like a Tommy Mace.
That's right.
No,
if someone touches her or so, it's a defilement. It's not the tuma that we're speaking of over here.
That's right.
Anyway,
it's not the same tuma.
David Soita Chav Ches Amid Beis.
We'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting to note.
I don't have it handy. I'm sorry.
What's interesting to note is if I would ask you, are these two machlokas totally zebazeh? Meaning, Rabbi Yosy, who holds benkach ubenkach tmein, would he be able to hold that by chametz, I don't have to be by each house? So from our Gemara, it's sort of mashma that they're linked, and that if I asked Rabbi Yosy, what would be the halacha? In our case, when chametz was brought into one of the two homes, Rabbi Yosy would hold that you have to be biding both homes. The problem is the Rambam paskins halacha l'maisa like Rabbi Yosy, yet the Rambam paskins by our case of chametz that you don't have to be biding both homes, which seems to contradict our Gemara, because our Gemara seems to say that these two shilas are linked, and doesn't seem to say. That's what the Gemara said. Hainu shnei shvilim. So the Stipler it makes a distinction between the two concepts. He explains that even though you say Savik Tomek Rishus Hayachot Sveker Tor, it's not a vadai, it's Tor misafik, and for that reason you cannot have a Tarti Desasri. But the Savik Derabanan Lakula, since the only requirement to make Bedika is a Savik Derabanan, the Rabbanan can paskin that whenever you have a suffix, you don't have to be boidik, even if it's tarti desasri. So the suffix Rabbanan Lakula could lead to a greater kula because the Rabbanan could make their own rules. And they could say that whenever there's a suffix, even if it's a tarti desasri, under those circumstances, a second bedika or a bedika on each of the homes would not be required. That's clear. But I'm just trying to illustrate that it's two different concepts. The Gemara is trying to say that they're somewhat related, but the makar of the Suffolk Tuma being tar is a derisidic rule about Suffolk Tuma Rishus Harabim, and the makar of the bedika being pater misafik is because it's Suffolk Derabanan Lakula. Okay, now let's try another case. Suffolk O, Suffolk loyal. Now you have a question. You have one pile of chametz, and you have one mouse, and you don't know if the mouse was here. It took some chametz, and you don't know if it went into your house or not. So do you have to be boidik your house? Zok the Gemara. So Rashi says, Ra achbar shenotel chametz b'chatzar. You saw an achbar take chametz in the chatzar. V'abayis bodik. You have already made b'dikas chametz. Ve'ein yodeya im nichnas oilin nichnas. You don't know if the mouse is in the house. So what do you do? Sofak al Sofak loyal. So Gemara hainu bika. That's the case of Bika. And the case of Bika is where you have a whole bunch of fields together in one big valley, and each field is separated by fences, it's demarcated, and one of the fields has a mace buried in it, and we don't know where it is, but all the fields don't. And you walk through the Bika, and you don't remember, you don't know exactly which field you were in. So you don't know if you happen to go through the field that had the mace in it. We went into a bika b'moisak shamim. What is the significance of Moisak shamim? In the Moisak shamim, things are growing. And when things are growing in the bika, in fields, those fields are kept closed and visitors are not welcome. Everybody has a big sign on their front lawn that says, please don't walk on the grass. So therefore, it's not considered Rosh Hashanah. In the summer, where the fields are fallow, there it's a free-for-all. Anybody can walk there. So the status of fields change. When things are being planted there and things are growing there, they're considered Rosh Hashanah. And when they're empty and no one cares if people walk through the fields, they're considered Rosh Hashanah. Now, of course, the Rosh Hashanah, the Rosh Hashanah that we're discussing has nothing to do with Rishuyos of Shabbos. It's a whole different idea of Rosh Hashanah. Is it a place where the public walks through, or is it not a place where the public walks through? So fields in the Moisak shamim are considered Rosh Hashanah. The Tumah, the Sada Plonis, and one of the fields, and we know which field it is, has Tumah inside. The Amar Echad, and one person said, Halachli b'makam alos, I walked through these fields, but the Eini idea im nechnasli b'oisa sada. I don't know if I was in that particular field where we know that there's Tumah's mace, there's a mace buried there. And I don't know if I went in or not. Rabbi Lazar metaher, the Chacham metam. Rabbi Lazar holds Torah and the Chacham holds Tameh. Now this is Suffolk Tameh, Rishus HaYachid Tzvek Tameh. That's why the Chacham are Metameh. Why is Rabbi Lazar metaher? Because Rabbi Lazar breaks it up and looks at it as a Svek Sveka. So Rabbi Lazar Omer, Suffolk Bia Tahar. If it's a Suffolk, if I even walked into the field, then I'm Tahar, because it's a Svek Sveka. Suffolk that I walk into that field or not. And even if I walked into that field, did I happen upon the mace? Or maybe I walked in the field in an area where the mace wasn't there. So since it's a Svek Sveka, Rabbi Eliezer holds that the Torah says Suffolk Tameh B'Rishus HaYachid Tzvekei Tameh. But that's a one Suffolk. A Svek Sveka, Zokt Rabbi Eliezer, would not be Tameh. Suffolk Maga Tumah Tameh. So if it's a Suffolk Bechalal, if I walked into the field, that's a Svek Sveka, Rabbi Eliezer holds his Torah. But Suffolk Maga Tumah, if I was for sure in the field, and the Shaila merely is, did I touch the Tumah, did I walk over the mace, then I agree it's going to be Tameh. So how does this relate to our case? We don't know if the mouse went in or not. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, you would be tar, because because we also have the same Svek Sveka. Rashi says over here, the Havel is Svek Safek Tumah B'Shus Yachid. Rabbi Eliezer lechashav l'Safek Tumah Elam Kain Nichnas l'Sada. Rabbi Eliezer holds, if you know for sure he went into the field, then it'll be a Safek. Aval en yedei im hel im loy. Aval hashta, but if you don't even know if you went into the field, Havel Svek Sveka. Safek if I went into the field, and even if I was in the field, who said I went over the mace? The Gabi Bottoms of Rashi are huge chiddush. Afilu Rabbanon Maidu, even the Rabbanon will be Maida. The Kivan the Bedikas Chamis the Rabbanon Talin Lakula. So Rashi says something very interesting. Even though our Gemara seems to say that our case would be just like the case of Bika, by Bika, there's in fact a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. Rashi wants to say, there we're talking about Tumah D'Oraisa. There we're talking about Tumah D'Oraisa. But by our case of a mouse, and we're not sure if it went into the house, there we say for sure it's going to be tar, or you don't have to be boidik, because it's a Safek Rabbanon. But the cases
the Chacham don't hold the Svek Sveka?
You mean the Chachamim you're asking, who argue?
Yeah.
No, they hold, it's one big Safek. It's like it's a little bit funny to say this is sfek. Suffolk, even if I was in the field, Suffolk, if I was within 6 feet or not within 6 feet, and if I was within 6 feet, maybe I wasn't within 3 feet, and if I was within 3 feet, maybe I didn't touch it. So they all you can't split it up that way. The Suffolk is: did you go over this mace or not? You can't create an extra layer of Suffolk and use it as a sfek by saying maybe I wasn't in the field because then anytime I can split it up that way. It's not a proper layer. Where Lezer holds, it's a properly demarcated layer of Suffolk. Maybe I wasn't in the field, but the Chum hold that's not a sfek.
Yossi,
Yes.
with suffix, why, if there's a suffix, why can't we just send it on the bittel and finish? Why do we have to?
Well, the shaila is, do the Rabbanan mandate a chiyuv b'dika in this case? Of course, the Rabbanan mandate a b'dika. We don't know if the mouse went into the house, and even if it went into the house, maybe it didn't leave the chametz there. So under those conditions, would the Rabbanan require b'dika's chametz? So our Gemara are saying, based on Rashi, that everybody would agree that under those circumstances, the Rabbanan didn't mandate the b'dika's chametz because it's a suffix Rabbanan. You can ask, Bichlal, why do I need B'dika? It's only a suffix if there's chametz there. It's under that suffix there might be chametz there, that the Rabbanan said, go make a B'dika. Right, that's the whole purpose of B'dika, to see if there's chametz there. However, if you already made a B'dika, and there's a suspicion that a mouse brought chametz back in, there, about the whole chiv is the Rabbanan, there the Rabbanan wouldn't mandate that you go back in. Okay, what happens if you went back in? Oh, ubodak. What if the mouse went in, and then you went in and you were boidik, v'loy ashkach, but you couldn't find. So the mouse took chametz into your house. There we know you have to make a b'dika. You went and made a b'dika, but you didn't find any chametz there. So to Gemara, what are you supposed to do? Look to the Reb Meir for Rabban. That will be toilet in a different machlokes between Reb Meir and Rabban. It's not. Reb Meir. What happens if there were 3 piles of rubble, and underneath one of the piles of rubble, we know for sure that there's a mace there. There's tumah there. So Reb Meir said, "Kol davar shebecheskas tumah, anything that's becheskas tumah, la'olam hu b'tumasai, it's always tamei achi vadalach hatumah heichani." So let's say we had 3 piles of rubble, and there was tumah under one of them. You don't know which one. If you're boidik one pile completely and thoroughly, and you see there's no tumah there, then that pile we know will be tahar. The other 2 still have a suffix. What if you were boidik a second one as well, and you verified that there's no tumah in the second pile? So now we can be sure there's no tumah in pile A, there's no tumah in pile B. Pile C must be the one with the tumah. What if you then check pile C, and you found out that there's no tumah there either? So you clearly must have missed it. So now they're all tumah again. You have to positively identify the tumah and where it is, otherwise all 3 will remain under a cloud of suffix.
Yossi, is this in our case in the chametz? Is it that there was for sure chametz in the house, or we're not sure if there was chametz in the house?
There was for sure chametz in the house because you saw the mouse take it in.
And we don't. I guess the Gemara is asking if we assume that he ate it, or.
Indeed, because let's see what the Chachamim say. Okay. The Chachamim say in the case of Tumah is boidik achi megia lasela or the karka basula. You have to be boidik thoroughly all 3 piles, and once you are, you could say it's tar. What happened? What happened to it? If we know one of the 3 piles had it, and now I can't find it, what happens? So Rashi says that the Chachamim hold that when that happens, you assume v'oimim bo oirev v'notla or bo achbar v'notla. We'll assume that some animal came and took away the tumah. The Gabba B'dikas Chometz, to answer Mechi's question, afilu l'Reb Meir amrinon achbar achla. You say that the achbar must have eaten it, the B'dikas Chometz terba. So according to the Chachamim, you never say that. According to the Chachamim, you say if you can't find it, you say that probably an animal ate it. But according to Reb Meir, once you know that there was Isser there, you have to keep on digging until you find it, and otherwise everything's going to be Tomei. Now Rashi again states that this is not, in our case of B'dikas Chametz, you don't have a Machlokes Reb Meir and Rabbanan, because even Reb Meir, who holds you have to keep on checking when it comes to B'dika, Reb Meir would be Moida. So here it is. Rashi says, by B'dikas Chametz, afilu li Reb Meir amrinan achber achla. Even according to Reb Meir, who's machmer by Toma, and says that you have to check again, it's going to be Tomei until you can positively identify the Toma. When it comes to Chametz, will be Mako, and if you were Boidik and you weren't able to find anything, you don't have to be Boidik again. Tosfos doesn't like Rashi because our Gemara says, similar to what the Gemara said before, is plukta der Rabbanan. And Rashi saying, no, it's not a Machlokes Reb Meir and the Rabbanan. Rather, everybody agrees that by B'dikas Chametz der Rabbanan, you would not have to be Boidik again. You would be able to say that the mouse probably ate it up. Tosfos doesn't like Rashi because that's not what the Gemara says. So Frek Tosfos, I don't understand. So what do you want from me? Bishlam, about a case of Tumah, will say the Psak Halacha is that since we couldn't find the Tumah, anything that came into contact with any one of these piles, we'll treat it like it's Tameh because there's a Savak Tumah buried in there. But by the B'dikas Chametz, what are we supposed to do? Be Boidik again? It won't help. You won't find it the second time either. So how could you say Reb Meir's halacha applies by B'dika? What are you supposed to do? Boidik again and again and again, you're not going to find it. So how are you going to resolve this? So Tosfos says that it must be speaking, the case over here must be speaking where you did not make bittul. And the Gemara is saying, according to Reb Meir, he would be forced to make bittul, because if not, he would be over at deraisa. So Tosfos wants to learn, not like Rashi, that everybody agrees here that you don't have to make a new b'dika because b'dika is b'derbanan. Rather, Tosfos learns our Gemara is discussing a case where the b'dika was required b'deraisa because you were not mevatel. Zokt Tosfos, according to Reb Meir, in our case, you would have to make a bittul because otherwise you have a chashash of the chavetz. Okay, so that's the next case. Now we have another case. How about olu badik v'ashkach? What if you went and you were badik chametz and you found chametz? You found the piece of bread that you think the mouse took it. The question is, who said this is the mouse? Who said this is the bread that the mouse brought into the house? Maybe this is a different piece of bread and the mouse's bread is somewhere else and you still have to look for it and you haven't found it yet. So all the bodak v'ashkach. Zok the Gemara, that's also plukta to the Rebbe Reb Shimon Gamliel. The time we learned, Sada shenevad b'kever. There was a field that a kever was lost in it. Somewhere in the field is a kever. We don't know where it is. So because of that, whenever you walk through this field, you're going to be Safek Tomei. So hanichnas l'seicha, you'll actually be valid Tomei if it's Rosh Hashanah, because Safek Tomei Rosh Hashanah, Shvekei Tomei. So hanichnas l'seicha, if you went into it, Tomei, you're going to be Tomei. Al Safek Tomei Rosh Hashanah. Nimtza b'kever. What if you found the kever? So now, if I know I didn't go near that kever, I went somewhere else in the field, then I'm nichnas l'seichetar. Shani Omer, I'll say, kever sha'avad hu kever shenimsa. We'll say that the lost kever that we didn't know where it was, since you found the kever, we'll say that was it, and there is no other kever in the field. And as long as you didn't come into contact with that kever that we discovered in the field, you're going to be taught. Divrei Rebbe, that's your Rebbe holds. But Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, Tibadek kol asada kula. You still have to be boidik the rest of the field. You don't just have to be boidik until you find a caver, and then you can say, oh, that must be the caver. No, maybe there was another caver there. So therefore, once a caver was lost in the field, even if you found the caver, you still have to be boidik the entire rest of the space. So, based on our sugya by B'dika, if you were boidik and you found a piece of bread, according to Rebbe, you can say that the bread that I found is probably the bread that the mouse brought in, and I could stop my B'dika. According to Reb Shimon Gamliel, you'd be forced to continue being boidik your entire house, even though you found a piece of bread that could be the bread that the mouse brought in, maybe not. So therefore, you would have to be boidik the entire house again. Okay, another case. You left 9 pieces of bread, and you came back, you left the house, you came back, and you found 10 pieces of bread. So now the question is, do we assume that the 9 pieces of bread that I left are these 9 pieces, and somehow someone brought an extra piece of bread over there, and therefore I don't have to be boidik? Or do you say, no, maybe if I found 10 pieces here, these are 10 new pieces, and my 9 pieces are lost, and now I have to be boidik the whole house over again. So this will be a machlokes between Rebbe and the Rabban. The Tanya we learned, if you had $100 of Meiser Sheni money, so it's money that you could only use in Yerushalayim, and you came back umatzum asayim, and you found that there were $200 there. That never, ever happened to me. Did it ever happen to you that you left $100 on the table and you came back and there were $200 there? That never happened to me. And if it did happen to me, it for sure would have only been with Mois Hektish. So Heniach Mona, if you left the money there, umatzum asayim, and you came back and there's $200 there. So the halach is chulin u'ma'ashusheni mu'rabban zebazeh. We'll say that your original $100 of Mois Mashusheni is there on the table, and the extra $100 is chulin. So now you have a mixture of chulin and Mashusheni, so you'd have to sort it out. Divi Rebbe, the Chachamim Oimrim hakoil chulin. You will say it's all chulin, and you'll say the $200 is fresh $200, and the $100 that you originally had there, that was Mois Mashusheni, that disappeared. So the same thing in our case. If you found 10 pieces there, according to the Chachamim, you'll say that these are a new set of 10 pieces. And now you have to be boidik your whole house because you lost 9 pieces of chametz. While according to Rebbe, you would say that no, the 9 pieces of chametz that I left are these 9 pieces, and it happens to be there's an extra piece there, and therefore I don't have to be boidik. So now the Gemara has another twist. What if you left 10 pieces of chametz there? You went away. When you came back, there were only 9 left. That would be similar to the seifa of this price. The Tanya we learned, what if you left $200 of Mois Mashusheni on the table, and you came back umatzah mana, and you found mana? So the Chachamim say, Rebbe say, mana munach umana mutal. What probably happens is one mana that's there is from your original mana of Meiser Sheni, and there's an extra mana over here. I'm sorry. So that's the case of mana. So mana, you'll say that one of the 2 manas, one of the $200 was taken away, and one of them was left there. So this is still Mois Mashusheni. We say that it's all chulin. Someone took the $200, and this new $100 that you see there is a new $100. So the same thing would be in our case. If you left 10 pieces of chametz, and when you came, you found 9, you don't say, okay, I have to just look for that one piece because the 9 are still here. Rather, you say all 10 got lost. The 9 that you found are a new set of 9 pieces of bread, and therefore you have to now find all 10 pieces of chametz all over again.
So it comes out that the kula by Meiser is a chumrah by B'dika.
Precisely. By Meiser it would be a kula because you could say it's chulin, it's totally replaced. By chametz, if it's totally replaced, then your trouble starts. Now that happens sometimes, that I have 9 pieces of chametz and I find a 10th. But it never happened that I left $100 and it turned into 200. I'm not sure why. Zog to Gemara weiter. Now how about another case? You left your chametz in one corner of the house, and you went away, and you came back. You found it in another corner. Now I know by me, if I look at the last place where I left something, and I can't find it there, and I break my head, and I look and I look and I look, and I can't find it, I always end up finding it exactly where I did leave it. It just means that I forgot where I left it, right? So that's the shadow we're going to have here. And you left your chametz in one corner of the house, and when you came back, you found it in another corner. We told you in the machlokes between Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and the Rabban. The Tanya we learned, Kardum sha'avad bebayis. I had an axe in my house, and I come home one day and my axe is missing. How did it get missing? Shani Omer, what must have happened is, Adam Tame Nichnas Lasham, Umeshamish Bechol Kli Habayis. I must have had a robbery. A person who's a robber will also assume that he's Tame as well, because he's not such an erlich person. And if he took my axe, he probably also rifled through everything in my house and touched everything in my house. And therefore, everything in my house we have to consider as Tame. Shani Omer Adam Tame Nichnas Lasham V'Natlei. Shimon Gamliel says, no, Habayis Tar. Shani Omer Hishilei La'acher. What probably happened was, if your axe is missing, no one stole it. You probably forgot that you lent it out last week. V'shokach, and you forgot. Oh, we can all relate to this. Oh, shenotlu izavazu, v'niach b'zavaz acheres. Or maybe you took it from one corner and put it into another corner. V'shokach, and you forgot about it. Fekmar zavas man dachar shemei. Who's talking about a zavas? We're talking about an axe that went missing. There's no zavas there. The Bryce is really discussing two cases. A, kardim sh'avad bevayis habayis tamei. If your axe went missing, everything in your house becomes tamei. Shani omer adam tamei nichnas l'sham v'natlei, and he took it. Oy, or another case is sheniche b'zavasu u'matze b'zavas acheres. If you left your axe in one corner, you found it in another corner, again you'll say habayis tamei. Shani omer adam tamei nichnas l'sham v'natlei mizavasu v'nichi b'zavas acheres. There must have been a break-in, and this person who broke in moved your axe from one side to the other side. But that means that everything now in your house is suspect. No, Habayis Torah. The bias is Torah. Because in the case of the axe that went missing, Shani Armer Hishil La'acher V'Shakach. And in the case of the axe that ended up being on the other side of the house, you probably moved it yourself and you probably forgot. So therefore, in our case of Tumah, do you say it was probably you and you forgot, and therefore you don't have to make a b'dika? Or are you choishish that there was a mouse here, and if a mouse moved it around, now all bets are off, and you'd have to be boidik the whole house all over again? Soon we're going to have Sylvester. We're going to have him soon coming, joining the picture. Amarava, how about Achbar Nichnas the kikar bepiv? A mouse had a kikar in his mouth, chametz, and he's walking into your house. And you go in right behind it and say, excuse me, buddy, what are you doing in my house? The mouse splits, but you don't see the mouse. All you see is crumbs on the floor. So can you assume that these crumbs are crumbs that came from the kikar that the mouse had in its mouth? No. You know why? A mouse does not leave crumbs. So these crumbs must be other chametz, and therefore you now have to be boidik your whole house. Amar Rav, and Rabbi said, how about tinek nichnas the kikar biyadeh? How about a child walks into your house after you made bedika with a cake, with a cookie, and nichnas acharov, and then you go after him to see where his cookie is, umatza perurin, and you find crumbs on the floor. There ain't tzarich bedika. You wouldn't have to make bedika. Because there you could assume.
I don't understand. If you went in, if there's no crumbs, you have to have a bedika.
No, we're talking about a house that was bought.
Right, and the mouse went in with the bread in its mouth.
There's no crumbs, and you don't find crumbs, then you have to make a bedika.
So what's the difference if there's crumbs or not crumbs? I don't understand what.
No, 1 second. If a mouse walked in and there was no crumbs, so the question is, if you find crumbs, can you stop your bedika and assume that, I found a piece of bread?
You only found crumbs. You didn't find the whole piece of bread.
Right, but so you'll assume that these are the crumbs of the bread. So you're asking me, even if I find crumbs, but there's more to the bread than the crumbs.
Right.
So Tosis asked your kasha, beautiful kasha. Zok Tosis, umayri sheyesh peruin kedei kalakikar. You find enough crumbs on the floor that you can assume the child dropped the whole cookie on the floor. He lost interest in it. He found a piece of licorice that you missed. He comes into the house that you're budget with a kikar. He's about to eat it, and then he sees a piece of licorice that you missed. Forget the kikar. I'm going for the licorice. Meanwhile, someone squashed it all up, and you found enough crumbs to account for the entire kikar. That's Tosus' shot. But other Rishonim say, even if you didn't find enough crumbs for the whole kikar, you can assume that the child ate some of it. So so even though you found crumbs, but not enough to account for the whole cookie, it's good enough that you don't have to make another bedika because you can assume that the rest of the cookie was eaten. So that's a good point that you're bringing up. So again, tinik nichnas the kikar b'yadoi the nichnas acharav v'matzah perurin there ain't tzarich bedika. Why b'pnei shedarka shel tinik l'fire? Because it's normal for a child to make crumbs, and therefore you can say that these crumbs come from there. Boyrov, achbar nichnas v'chikar b'piv. What if you see a mouse going into your house and it has a cookie in its mouth, and then when you're coming to do the bedika, the achbar yoytzev v'chikar b'piv, you see the mouse leaving. So could you say, okay, I'm good to go? The same kikar that the mouse brought in, the mouse brought out. Or maybe the mouse left the kikar that he brought in somewhere. Now I got to go with it. And even though I see the mouse walking off the kikar, maybe it's a different kikar. If you're going to say you can assume it's the same mouth with the same mouse with the same cookie in its mouth, how about achbar lova nichnas? It was a white mouse that came in with the kikar b'piv. The achbar shocher yoytzei, and a different color mouse left the kikar b'piv. Mao, what would you say? Hi vada yachvinahu. This must for sure be a different kikar, and therefore I got to be boided because I have to find the kikar that the other mouse brought in. Maybe the black mouse, Black Lives Matter. Maybe the black mouse ripped off and grabbed away the kikar from the guy, from the mouse with the white mouse, and therefore you don't have to be boided. If you hold that mice have professional courtesy and they don't steal from each other, what would be if achbar nichnas v'kikar b'piv v'chol yoytzes the kikar b'piv? A mouse walks in with a kikar, and then Sylvester walks out with the kikar. Mao, what do you say? The Sylvester took the food away from the mouse, and therefore you don't have to be boided. Or maybe no, Sylvester found his own kikar, and I'll prove it to you that Sylvester didn't take away the kikar from the mouse that brought it in. If Sylvester took the cake away from the mouse, forget the kikar being in the mouth of Sylvester, the mouse would have been in the mouth of Sylvester. I thought I put it that, right? And if you're going to learn, so if you're going to say that it has to be a different kikar, because if it was the same kikar, what would have happened is he would have had a mouse in his teeth, and there would have been a kikar in the mouse. What about achbar nichnas, the kikar b'piv? A mouse went in and had a kikar in his mouth. V'chol the yoytzes, and then Sylvester comes out, v'kikar v'achbar b'fi cholda. And he has both in his mouth a cookie on one side and the mouse on the other side. Ma, what would be the halacha? Hacha vadai ihu, this must be the same kikar, and when he snatched the mouse, he also snatched the kikar. Idilma, if this was the kikar that was in the mouth of the mouse, im isa the iu niu, that it's the same kikar, then kikar b'fi achbar mishtaka chavaboy. What should have happened is the kikar should be in the mouth of the mouse, and the mouse should be in the mouth of Sylvester. Or maybe you say this makes sense because Mishum be a susa hunafal. When the mouse was running away from Sylvester, in his panic he dropped the kikar. Then Sylvester chapped the mouse, and then he moved over and chapped the kikar as well. The shaklas and yonaf tibaydik. So tomorrow teku it lives be suffolk. Now it's already very late, so we better stop. We'll have to finish off the rest of the shilas tomorrow.
Sure.
All I know is if there was any mouse at all, my wife would be gone.
All right.
Have a wonderful day.